difficulties. I am not the most tech-savvy adult living in today's technology, social media-driven world. I appreciate everybody's patience, especially Tim Corbin. My name is Walter Beede, and this evening in our Coach's Corner edition, we're going to spend some time with Coach Corbin. We're going to talk Vanderbilt baseball, college baseball, and anything related to baseball with regard to the youth baseball landscape. I want to thank everybody for being patient. I want to thank everyone for sending in questions. We probably had well over 100 questions that were submitted. I certainly cannot ask all 100 where I am able to paraphrase and group together. That's my mission, and I hope you can understand that we just don't have that type of time. But Tim, first and foremost, because I didn't get a chance to say hello, how is everything in Nash Vegas?
Good. About 8 days away from starting the season. Kind of seeing the light at the tunnel now. So I think my boys are excited, and they get to get the competition here very soon.
And I know you're excited because we're very close to the start of the season, and I know that happens in 8 days, and I know that's your favorite time of year once you kick off your season. How are the boys, and how are they anticipating? Are they ready to go and prepared to kick off the 23 season?
Yeah, I know they're ready to go, but I think they do a good job of containing that emotion of playing outside competition by being as present as they possibly can in the training environment. And I think that speaks to their maturity and what it means in the long run. I'm not sure, but I think when you're exposed to kids that are doing well academically and can really center themselves in practice and in training, I think you have a chance to get better. So they've done that well, and they're not talking about what's ahead of them. I think that's the cool part. They're really talking about what they can do right now.
Now, Tim, in the start of every baseball season, a lot of parents, are watching. It's February here in Boston. We're not ready for high school baseball season. The college baseball season has a different type of vibe and a different type of energy. You really have to hit the ground running. And I'd love for you to spend some time sharing with parents and student athletes obviously more so, the preparation that leads up to the college season. There's a progression that's done, over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks that leads into the season. Can you just kind of touch upon that? You're not running guys out there to throw 9 innings and 110 pitches on Friday, February, 17th. This is a progression within your season, correct?
Yeah, it is. And I think I think I've spoken to you about this before, Walter. I think the college season gets on us quicker than really it should from a health standpoint. I would probably much rather see it start March 1st for the sake of the kids, but since it doesn't, then we have to ramp up quick. I think what's important for these kids is when they go home for those 30, 35 days for Christmas break and trying to, you've had September and October and November and part of December is training months. And then you go home for a time where really the training environment is now on your shoulders. But when they get back here, we treat them all basically the same in terms of a build up to get going. The first week we started about 20 pitches. The second week, we get into the 35 pitch limit and then build it up to 45. And I think right now, Walter, there's somewhere between 55 and 65 pitches. So when we start the season, you essentially, if you're going to play 3 games, you probably need 9 starters, right? You're not going to throw a kid 80, 90 pitches. So you're going to use a lot of bodies, which is good. But at the same time, it's a long season, and you don't want to blow it out that first week.
Now, I have a multitude of questions here, Tim, and I'm just going to try to pick them off because I certainly don't want to monopolize the conversation, and I want to keep it to Vanderbilt, your personal thoughts with regard to recruiting for Vanderbilt, what makes Vanderbilt special. First parent that sent in a question that I want to make sure I get off to you is, what do you feel recruits value most in their choice where to play? Is it the academics? Is it the coaching, exposure? What is it that you feel recruits value most when it comes to Vanderbilt University?
I think it's a combination of academics, athletics, development, the environment, because our environment it's intense, but at the same time, it's such where there's expectation only from the investment level of what kind of player you want to be. So there's a lot of time associated with being organized to get down here, to get on the field, but at the same time, organized enough to make sure that academically you put yourself in a good position to where that's not lingering in your mind once you get down to the field. But I think the kids that decide to come here, I'm sure the level of consistency over time with the outcomes that we've had, but I think it probably gets down to they see themselves as someone that sees development is important to them and relational, because I think at the end of it, when you look at our facilities, they're all built upon the kids that are here now, but they're also built upon the kids that are about to leave. And the kids that are about to leave are all the pro players that are here right now, which there's anywhere from 30 to 50 of them that are here every morning. So I think when a kid comes in and sees that, they understand that there's a relationship piece to this that exists inside the environment.
On that note, a few weeks ago, I had Rhett Weissman join me for an episode. And I want to broach this early in our discussion because I think it's valuable and I think there's some continuation from what you just discussed. Mm-hmm. He mentioned to me that after the completion of the 2014 season, in your classroom setting, you just wrote on a blackboard or on your whiteboard 2014-2015. And he really made a point to tell me in great detail that as you began to discuss the topic of the upcoming 14-15 season, that you walked over to the board and you circled the little dash in between 2014 and 15. And I want you to kind of talk about the meaning and the value of that dash as it relates to the Vanderbilt family, as it relates to your coaching staff. We talk about analytics and statistics, but I really would love it if you could kind of expand upon Rhett's story of the dash.
Well, it's like you have a starting point and an ending point in every experience that you have. And certainly in ours here at Vanderbilt, when the kids get here, whether it's August 17th or 18th, that's their beginning. And there's a date to it. And then we were exposed in 14 to 15 to extending our baseball life to the longest period of time that we possibly could, which was the last day of playing in Omaha. 1 year winning it, the last year losing it, but still playing that last day. But at the end of it, and I think what's most important is that time period that's in between those two dates, the start and the finish, because that's where all the experiences lie. And the dash is essentially that. It's just all the experiences that you have inside of that. And I think whether it's going to Tyler's wedding, your son's wedding, or going to Dansby Swanson's wedding, the two things that stick out to me the most is when you get in those environments after they're long gone and left Vanderbilt, is when you get those group of people that are there at that wedding and you're all clustered together and you're talking about it, no one ever reverts back to talking about the scores, the games, a national championship, or what you did. It all goes back to those funny stories that made them laugh and made them think the most. And you know it, that was in your experience as well. But that's what it is. It comes down to the relationships that you build inside those two dates and the environment that you create inside those two dates. And that's what makes college baseball, at least in my opinion, so fulfilling, is because it becomes emotional. It gets in your heart. And when it gets in your heart, you're pulled and tugged towards something. And I think that's why I enjoy it so much, is because it's a real feel of human relationships that are very important, but extend themselves long beyond those 2 dates. So what Rhett was speaking to inside that dash is just the experiences that you have that lead to emotional feelings that you have about that environment and the people in that environment, the people in the place.
What I enjoy most about letting folks know that Tim Corbin was going to join me today was the amount of stories that I have received from student athletes that you coached or recruited while at Presbyterian, then at Clemson, and then early in your Vanderbilt career. And something that's very fresh in my mind that I will always kind of have when I think of Tim Corbin is second game against Louisville, 2013 Super Regional Final game. The whole world is out in the Hawk at the stadium, and you're leaning up against the fence adjacent to the baseball office and the baseball workout facility, and your head is in your hands. And I'll never forget the sentence that you uttered the next day. You said, Maggie told me if I'm in this and it's all about winning the last game, that I really should reevaluate if I want to be involved in coaching. Mm-hmm. And I think about all the people that you've touched, and I know how they feel about you. How do you feel as a college coach about the experience in its entirety, meaning not only the relationships, the wins, the losses, but you've been doing this now for well over 30 years, going into 35 years. What is this all about for you?
Well, I'm probably more equipped now to talk about that and process that now, Walter, than I was as a younger coach. And I don't, whether that was a fault of mine or not. I think when you're a younger coach, you do find yourself chasing the outcomes. And maybe not all young coaches feel that way, but, you get pulled towards building something that has strength, and you feel like the strength of it is just how many games you can win and how many championships that you can win. And I think as you get older, you start to understand that when you don't chase those things and that doesn't become your compass, then you actually can find yourself in those experiences more so. I think the thing that made one of the greatest impressions to me of all time was Coach Winkin, who was the former coach at Maine, and he was the regional, he was the NCAA regional rep for us when we played Michigan in 2007. And that was the year we were number one in the country for about 14 straight weeks. We were picked to go to Omaha. We hosted a regional for the first time, and we ended up winning the first game, losing the second game to Michigan, but we came all the way back and ended up playing them in the final game. And David Price was a kid who had not given up a home run all year. And in that particular game, as painful as it was, we put him in to pitch the final inning, and he gave up the game-winning home run to Michigan, and they went on and ended up going to the Super Regional, and that was the end of our year. Maggie and I went to breakfast the next day, and we went to breakfast with Coach Winkin, and I asked Coach, I just wanted his opinion because he's an old soul and he's very astute. And I said, Coach, give me your thoughts on what you saw. And he said, and this was tough to hear, he goes, I knew you guys were going to lose. And I said, why did you say that? He said, I could feel the pressure you were putting on the team on Thursday night during practice. And that pressure that you put on yourself and the team, I felt was going to be the thing that was going to hurt you guys and disrupt your trek. And he was right. And I never forgot that, because he said at some point in time, you're going to end up getting this opportunity again. You might end up winning it. But when you do that, it's going to be because you're more stuck in the growth of the kids rather than chasing the outcome of what potentially could exist for you guys. And he was right. I mean, he was 100% right. And I think, I think any of us who have been in these opportunities before, whether it's high school or whether it's junior college, what have you, is sometimes we get in our own way, not really intentionally doing so, because we all want to do right by the kids. but we end up getting in their way just because of our own emotions and what we're giving off to them when we're thrust into those environments for the first time. So I think what I've learned, and much to what you started this with, was Maggie just making sense of that, saying, listen, if you're in this only to win the last game, she goes, you're going to die a very frustrated man. You've got to find other things inside of what you're doing that are more fulfilling than being the last team. She says there's 300 teams. There's only one team that's going to win it all. So you have to understand that it's going to be about the process. If you don't feel it's about the process, then you might as well get out of the game right now and do something else, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. And she was 100% right. Now, I know it's difficult to do. I mean, I can talk about that with clarity right now because we're not in the season of competition. But the reality is I can handle that thought process of doing that during this time a whole lot better than I could even 2 years ago, Walter. I mean, it's with age, and it's like anything else. You do it enough, then you start to understand that, what the hell was I doing? You know, it's like, I think all you want to do is create an environment and facilitate an environment that the kids can grow from. And if you're getting in the way of it, then you got to ask yourself, then I got to do it better. I got to reevaluate what I'm doing, and I got to give our guys a better opportunity to do this. So it really made a lot of sense to me.
You know, a lot of the questions coming in tonight are, what makes a Vanderbilt recruit? What does the coaching staff at Vanderbilt look for in a potential recruit? And I'm going to ask it in a much different way. Mm-hmm. If I said to you in 2009, Mike Yastrzemski, I'm going to rattle off last names, Flaherty, Kemp, I could rattle them all off. These weren't student athletes that I would say were ranked really high at any level. They weren't nationally known players, but yet each of those three names I just rattled off had long, or continue to have long, major league careers. What are you seeing in these types of grinders, these types of under the radar student athletes that make them become such a valuable piece to the culture and the program of Vanderbilt University?
I think because they played the game to compete. I think they made it simple. I don't think they overthought what they were doing. All three of those kids, you mentioned Yastrzemski first, you mentioned Tony Kemp second, you mentioned Ryan Flaherty third, all multi-sport athletes. I mean, Yastrzemski was a hockey player, Ryan Flaherty was a quarterback, Tony Kemp was a running back. I mean, I got to see all those kids do other things besides play baseball. And I think they really excelled in team activity. And I think team activity, when it's shared, it doesn't feel overwhelming. When you feel like you're doing something by yourself, then that's where the expectation of performance starts to get in the way of what you're doing. And I think Mike Yastrzemski made the game of baseball very simple. He just competed very well. His name could have been Mike Smith. Now, the allure initially when I saw Yaz play was his grandfather, obviously, because that was my favorite player. But then I started looking at him and I've said to myself, okay, if his name was Mike Smith, would you still have interest in this kid? And I think the thing that I saw in him was just a young guy that was small in stature, but playing the game at a level that I thought, in time, this guy's going to be a very successful college player. I saw that in Tony Kemp. Mike Yastrzemski was 5'11". Tony Kemp was 5'6". Ryan Flaherty was 6'3". But Ryan Flaherty still, to your point, he didn't run a 6'8", 6'9". He wasn't throwing the ball across the diamond at 90 miles an hour as a high school kid. He wasn't hitting balls over the fence as a high school kid either. But all three of them, being position players, they knew how to get the barrel to the ball. They were contact guys first, and they played to win. And I think playing to win and playing because you enjoy the team environment is the secret to a kid getting inside of environment and really enjoying it to the level where it becomes play baseball. It's not work baseball. And I felt like those kids could really excel in this environment right here, especially in a situation where we predicated ourselves on coaching and teaching those types of kids, athletic kids who really like to compete.
Well, I think the number one takeaway from that, obviously over and above multi-sport athletes, is the desire to compete in in all aspects of their life, in the classroom, obviously on the diamond. And I want to kind of continue this by saying, has the role of the high school athlete been diminished due to the changes within the upper levels of baseball? Has the high school recruit kind of taken on a lesser shine? Is it now more the portal, the JUCO, the post-grad, and then the high school athlete? Or is the high school athlete still an active part of your recruiting classes?
Well, for us it is, because I think the college environment's getting older, especially in a conference like ours. I understand that. Part of it is COVID, but part of it is the portal and understanding that, if you're going to have winning teams, then you want to have older players. Yes and no. I mean, you can have winning well, first off, you can sign talent. You can sign really good players. You can pay talent. You can pay really good players. But you can't pay to make a team. Teams are made because of individuals that collectively get into an environment and want to do something because they want to do it together. And I think the high school athlete now for us is just as important as it's ever been. We don't use the portal much at all. We've had 2 grad students here in the last 3 years. Now we have had some kids leave our program to go to other places, and I understand that they want opportunity, and I do get that. But I think for us, it's trying to build classes where you create space for these freshmen to develop and grow, because if they're allowed to develop and grow over time, they're going to be that young guy that you could say to yourself, yeah, I want to go into free agency and grab a junior or senior from another team. Well, you have your own portal inside your own organization if you do it right. And I say do it right, do it the way you want to. And I think the development piece for us has always been the priority and will always continue to be the priority. And it's just about trying to retain the kids that you sign, try to give them space to grow so they don't feel overwhelmed or stepped over by an older guy that you would take that will block their development, that will block them getting on the field and, lose their hope in trying to develop inside your program. So, yeah, there's certainly been a change in that from a college baseball standpoint. And, it doesn't really matter what I think, but what matters how I think is what we do inside of our program. And what we do inside of our program is just try to stick with the values of recruitment that have been important to us from the day we started here in 2002.
One of the questions that I want to ask you, and I know I can ask this from more of a friend perspective than college coach perspective, and that is, with the advent or the recognition that name, image, and likeness is here pretty much to stay, at least as it is today, there may be some tweaks. With football and basketball, and the exorbitant amount of money that's being thrown around, are we forcing younger athletes to choose other sports? Because we're looking at this as it's a tough entry point for young baseball players, and the money that is being thrown around in this NIL packages is getting a little crazy, and it's kind of forcing younger athletes to choose big money sports, for lack of a better term. Do you think that's going to begin to hurt the youth levels of baseball?
I guess potentially. I mean, I don't think it's good for our game. I think it takes the amateurism out of it. I think it forces people to make decisions based on other reasons that aren't healthy necessarily for them. If your decision of school X versus Y is based on monetary reasons, then I think essentially then you're probably you're not making decisions based on a priority of education, priority of development, priority of where you fit from a relationship standpoint. I think those things are lost. And yeah, I do. I think money has gotten in the way for a lot of different reasons. You can go to amateur baseball and to college baseball, and at the core, it it creates a rub, and it creates a rub inside the game. And as I said, Walter, I don't have to like it, which I don't, but I have to live with it. But it doesn't mean that Vanderbilt or another program has to move away from what they value is important in their program, regardless of what anyone thinks. And, you and I know we've had these conversations before. Kids are spending a lot of money to go to school at Vanderbilt, whether they're getting financial aid or whether they're getting a scholarship. They're spending a lot of money to come to school. And NIL isn't a part of what we do here at Vanderbilt right now. It could be eventually, but we're not luring kids to Vanderbilt because of that. If they acquire that while they're here because of their abilities, that's one thing. But I don't want kids, at least coming to Vanderbilt, to make those choices based on what they could get monetarily. I want them to see this as an experience where they're going to grow, where it puts them in a great position once they leave here, whether it's baseball or whether it's out of baseball, but particularly out of baseball, because there's all an ending point to playing the game. I think when you're 18, 19, you're on the back end of your career. Whether you want to believe that or not, you're at the back end of your career, and you just have this short window of time to play. So understanding, and whoever allows you to understand that, whether that's a teacher, whether it's your parents, whether it's coaches, to understand that I'm using baseball and my baseball skill sets to acquire an education that is going to allow me to set myself up and put a lottery ticket in my back pocket once I eventually finish playing the game. And that's really the root of it for us. I know a lot of things can get lost in translation, as you go through the recruitment process, but we try to keep it pretty simple. And in our conversations, if we get caught in those conversations where they're speaking more towards the monetary value of what they're going to gain inside of this, then this isn't the place for them. And I get it. Yeah, people make choices based on other things, but in this case, it's not going to work here.
I want to talk to you about the word leadership, and I want to specifically speak to your 21 years at Vanderbilt. When my dad was alive, when your dad was active, when you were a young player, they were involved as far as going to our games and supporting us. In today's world, a lot of parents are engaged. They're umpires, they're coaches, they're parents. And, I know that you have a strong feeling towards this, but has that kind of developed less leaders coming out of high school and into the college game? Is leadership something that you're finding you have to teach more than maybe in years past?
Yes and no. I think just in general, to your point, I don't think we're giving young people ownership of their experiences, especially when we as adults intertwine ourselves in their playground. This isn't ours. It's theirs. And I think when I talk to my kids, and just basically, if I give them the visual of the 4 lanes of responsibility, and if we had 4 lanes on a highway, we're all moving in the same direction, and we're all moving towards our goal, whatever it may be. But in doing so, the responsibility lies in the lane that you're in. And if you're a player, you play. You don't umpire, you don't coach, you just play the game. If you're invested inside the game, then as a player, you're giving yourself the gift of playing. If you're a coach, we're basically facilitators of an environment. We create the environment for the players to play, and you let the kids play. You stay out of their way. You create the environment, you teach. If you've taught well, then you remove yourself, because really the game of baseball is their playground. If you're an umpire, you stay in that lane. You officiate the game. They help move it along. They don't coach. They don't parent, but yet they're caretakers of the game just to support the game as it's moving. And as a parent, you're not a coach, you're not a player, and you're not an umpire. Your role basically is to support the team, support the environment. You're not doing any of those other things, coaching, officiating, Parent means support. It means be the face that other parents need to see. Be the face of strength that your child needs to feel. Because if you lose your emotional control, you've essentially now added extra weight to your son's or daughter's shoulders. And that weight pulls their chest down, pulls their face down, pulls their chin down, and they no longer smile. And that little playground that we have on the field, that turns into an emotional child prison for them. And that's not what we want to create. That's not what we want to create at all. But the only way you create that is if those 4 lanes can be lived in, and you can stay in that lane, and you can support that lane and allow the other people in their lane just to do their job as well as they can. But the only reason a parent or an umpire, a coach is in this is for the kids.
Right.
And you got to give it to the kids. You just give it to the kids. Let the kids have it. You know, Molly, our daughter, and Kyle, they were making a decision on Price. He's 1 year old, and they were making a decision on what school right now to put him in. And the school that they eventually put him in was, you drop him off at 8 o'clock and you pick him up at 1 o'clock, but at no point in time do you enter that school. And I remember talking to Molly and Kyle, and they were a little bit apprehensive at first. And I said, perfect. That's what you want. You just want your child safe, but yet you're not going to go in there and involve yourself in that environment. It's the child's environment set up by the school itself. Imagine if you had Little League games where the only people inside of environment were the coaches, 2 or 3, the umpires, and the kids, and no one else, like Molly and Kyle. You drop your child off, they play. But once you drop them off to play, they play. The only time it becomes work is when you enter the environment and you start engaging in their environment, the one that they're supposed to enjoy. Now you've turned the playground into a jail. And now you've turned it into a situation where they no longer enjoy it because you've taken that weight, and the smile that they had on their face is now pulled down because of the weight that's on their shoulders and that they're carrying around. You don't want to do that to a kid. And I think we're all, to some point, including myself, is guilty of that. And I think once you start to recognize that, you're right. It's play baseball. It's not work baseball. It's not expectation baseball. It's not, I'm playing baseball for an outcome. It's not, I'm playing baseball for a scholarship. If that happens, you get a scholarship. If you get an opportunity, you get an opportunity. But if you set those expectations in front of you and you're chasing all these bright lights and shiny objects, well, my God, that kid's not going to enjoy it. And they're going to get themselves in a situation to say, you know what? How can I exit this game as quickly as I can because I no longer enjoy it? And, you know, who are making these decisions for these kids? We are. We're adults. We're making the decision. No kid has ever put himself in a situation with saying, I want to play baseball and I want 15 yelling parents on one side and I want 15 yelling parents on the other side. And I want to see the umpire so upset that he leaves the game because he can't do it anymore because he feels like he's being tortured. That's not the environment that kids are having a good time in. When you can allow the kids to enjoy it and there can be some freedom with what they're doing, you're going to see natural growth inside of it. And you're going to see a natural feel towards, I love what I'm doing. Isn't it funny? We love what we're doing when the parent or whomever isn't attached to the result.
I mean, if I could just drop the microphone there, I would just drop it because that you just absolutely crystallized everything that I could get across to parents. And I want to kind of follow that up by asking you, and I'm not asking Vanderbilt, I'm asking Corbin, because you can't control any other schools or what the parents do. Oh, commitment at the 8th grade level and announce this dream of where I'm going to go to school and I'm an 8th grader. I know some boys have committed when they were 8th grade, they end up going to the college of choice. Is it good for the game? Is there anything on the horizon that would kind of get baseball to follow? Discussion about, do you see anything on the horizon as far as baseball where you to a college your junior?
I think you were breaking up a little, Walter. I had a hard time hearing the question, but and tell me if I'm wrong. The question had more to do with young kids and the development of 7th and 8th graders and young kids moving towards college baseball. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, correct.
Okay. I just think it's really what you put in front of these kids. I think it's more about at the age of 12 and 13 and 14, it's more about showing a young man how to prepare, or showing a young woman how to prepare for competition more than anything else. I think it's not showing them how to audition for an outcome, for a scholarship, for an opportunity. There's so much change that takes place in a 13, 14-year-old as opposed to where they are in 17 and 18 years of age. Some kids are a lot bigger. Some kids have come into their physical strength or their skill a lot quicker. And I think at the end of it, when you start triggering young kids at the age of 13 and 14 for grown-up decisions on doing something that is 6 and 7 years away from that time, what we're doing, you're basically leading them into something that they're not ready for. I mean, the brain development in a 13, 14-year-old, let alone 18, 19, 20-year-old male, is far away from being in a position where they're making decisions, grown-up decisions on where they should be at the age of 18 and 19. I just find that so unbelievable that an adult could put a young person in that predicament, which it is a predicament, on having to choose something in their life that is so important, one of the biggest decisions that we'll ever make in our life, that you've put someone in a corner to have to choose what they're doing at that age. We're not helping that young person in any shape or form. I mean, we're really putting them at odds with the natural progression of life, which is really should be learning how to brush their teeth. They really should be learning how to pick out their clothes. They really should be learning how to go into 8th grade and understand a little bit of social skills, not making a grown-up decision at a level of life that they're not ready for. Walter, I don't know if I still have you.
Me, Tim?
Yep, I hear you now.
Right, good enough. There we go. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties here. So my question was exactly what you thought it was.
Yeah.
The kind of the pressure or the 7th and 8th grade component. Is there anything in place coming down the road that baseball, NCAA baseball, will join lacrosse and softball and having a commitment date for incoming recruits?
Not as of yet, and if we don't have anything coming down the road, then we're relying upon common sense, and common sense is very expensive right now. So I think at some point in time we should make that adjustment just for the sake of the kids, for no other reason, just the kids. And what it potentially does by doing that is it allows them to get in that space and just enjoy what they're supposed to enjoy, and that's competition with kids their same age, and not worry about what they're going to gain from it. I don't think there's anything to be gained from a 14-year-old that's dominating that environment right now, when the truth of the matter is, it's like, for instance, you take the USA team this summer that Brownie was coaching, Scott Brown, our pitching coach, and you take all the Cape Cod League All-Stars, and you see all those kids that are excelling at that age and what they were at the age of 15 and 16, most of them were not high level players at that point in time. And I think kids that have been fed early at an early age feel like they've reached a finish line, and they lose their hunger for what they're supposed to do. And I think when you're 15 or 16 and you haven't been fed, then you continue being hungry because you put a lot of time and effort into what you're doing. And I really think that if it gets back to that and gets back to just young kids playing with young kids and just playing for the reasons of growth, then I think you're going to find a more natural environment inside of competition. And I think it'll lessen the pressure that parents feel by having to make decisions at the age of 13, 14, and 15, which truly put their child in a tough position, especially now when you have all this movement in college baseball. Then why in the hell would you make a decision to do something at 13 or 14 where most kids are changing their mind at age 18 and 19 and 20? That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, on that very topic, I want to kind of bring in or tie in the word development. We use this word, or the industry as a whole uses development in a myriad of different ways, and they're all trying to build and hype a product. But at the end of the day, it gets lost. We all want to play now. We feel like we should be starting. So I want to bring up a name, Tyler Campbell. And Tyler Campbell is the name that I use when I speak at Little Leagues and high school banquets and so forth, and I talk recruiting. I tell the story of Tyler Campbell and waiting, and every day in practice, showing up, giving his best, preparing to get that opportunity. And when the opportunity comes, to be ready to compete. And so Tyler Campbell, for those of you that don't know, 2014, Xavier Turner, starting third baseman the entire year. You get to Omaha. There's an issue, technicality. Tyler Campbell ends up having to play in arguably the biggest 3 games of the year and shines. Can you just talk about that, being a part of a team, even as a non-starter? It's critical for you to prepare as if you are a starter or are going to start.
That's right. I mean, he's a wonderful story. I mean, he had 17 at-bats that entire year. And you mentioned we lost Xavier, our third baseman, after 2 games. We had won the first 2 games in Omaha, and right before we played the third one against the University of Texas, Xavier was sent home. We went out to dinner that night. I remember we took the kids to an Italian place, and we were trying to figure out who would play third base. We had some ideas, and Tyler certainly was in that discussion. I get back to the hotel that night. Your son, Dansby Swanson, they're probably a group of 8, and they wanted to know. They said, "Corbs, what are your thoughts on third base?" And I said, "I'm thinking about Tyler Campbell." And the minute I said that, they said, "That's your guy. That's your guy." And I said, "Okay, I just want to know from my vantage point why he's our guy." And they just proceeded to say, "That guy comes to practice every single day, knowing that he's not going to play. And during that 50-minute period before the game even starts in BP, he sells out defensively like it's his last time he's ever going to be on the field." And I said, "I'm glad you guys recognize that." I said, because that's not only going to help Tyler Campbell, but that's going to help from years going forward. Well, this kid, as you know, you basically told it, because he plays the next day, but where he really shined was the 4th game against Texas in an elimination game, where he turned a double play with the bases loaded with 1 out. And then he comes up against Virginia in the very first game and hits a bases clearing double. I think for all intents and purposes, there were a lot of MVPs in that series, but I think a lot of people, Walter, would have said Tyler Campbell was the difference. That kid was the difference. But the word patience, the reason we have a very active portal is because kids aren't patient and they don't understand the value of failing. If we aren't exposed to any failure, then we can't ever understand how to be resilient. And you can't understand or demonstrate resilient behavior without failure. And failure takes time. It takes experiences. And experiences aren't gained in a year. They're not gained in 2 years. They're over time. And what Tyler Campbell was exposed to, he wasn't exposed to necessarily failure, but he was exposed to understand what a team role was first before he understood what a playing role was. If we could do this and we could do it right, regardless of how good a kid is, we would put them in a team role first before they ever understand what a playing role is. Because essentially what you're teaching a kid at that age by being involved in a team sport and understanding what a team role is, they're understanding essentially what a parent is. Because if you're a dad or you're a mom and you have kids, you're always in a team role. It's never about you. It's never about your playing time as a parent. It's always about your kids. But you understand what a team role is first. And I think the quicker a young male can understand that, you're giving him a gift. You're giving him a gift. You say, no, the gift is playing time. No, the gift is understanding how to get on the field, but understand how to celebrate other people first before you become a celebrated person. That truly is understanding what a team role is.
And if you could summarize just the college experience. I've listened to students that you coached at Presbyterian. I've listened to student athletes that you've coached at Clemson. I've obviously been a part of and listened to student athletes you've coached at Vanderbilt. The college experience over and above baseball, those 3, 4, or even 5 years that you're spending with a student athlete, they essentially become part of, and I know this to be a fact, Maggie and your family. But could you just summarize to parents, there's so much more to this than baseball. You know, when I made that decision with Tyler and myself and Cheryl, his mom, it was more about college experience. Could you just summarize what it's like to see a boy come in at 18 or 19 and leave as a man at 22 or 23 years of age?
Well, I think it's emotional growth more than anything, Walter. I think the one thing, and I can speak to the parental side of this too, because both you and I and Maggie had children that attended Vanderbilt, and Tyler used his baseball skill sets to be here. Hannah used her tennis skill sets to get here. And I think they're both very realistic kids. And I think if you ask Tyler and Hannah, they'd say, I'm not a Vanderbilt student. Right. But I'm getting a Vanderbilt education because of my athletic abilities. But I'll tell you what they did is they became Vanderbilt students, because when you get involved in a very challenging academic environment, you're basically growing the muscle that is essentially the one that's going to move the body. It's really your heart. It's your hard drive, and your software is essentially your physical skill sets. But unless you have a hard drive that can move the software, your software is never going to produce the results that you want. And I think when Tyler and Hannah started tapping into mental skill sets that they didn't think they had, that's where I felt like they earned their self-esteem. That's where I felt like they earned their confidence. And that's where you started to see their emotional and mental abilities transition onto the field. And it's where Tyler started to grow. It's where Hannah started to grow. But their growth is an extension long after they leave here. But I think inside of that growth is certainly what we do in this environment, but it's really the 14 other hours that they are away from this environment, that they share time with their teammates, that there's a social environment to this, but they're doing it in unison with a group of people that are like-minded like them. So what they're challenged to do is, although they're 18 and 19 years old, they're challenged to live like an adult and move towards adult behaviors based on choices and decisions that they're learning inside a structured environment that's pushing them, with the help of other people around them, to realize what they can become. And once they start getting closer to what they can become, they start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And to me, that's where real mental growth is had. And I felt like, we're talking about our two kids, but we're talking about so many other kids. And, it's like what I began this conversation with, Walter. It's everything that they talked about at those weddings that was not related to a baseball field. It was the foundation and it created that. But what it created way more than that was those experiences that happened inside of this environment that had nothing to do with throwing a ball, hitting a ball, or catching a ball.
Well, I'm getting chastised by two big-time Vanderbilt fans, and I want to make sure I get their questions in. And the first is pertains to, and I'm going to make them quick, Tim, because I know we're up against time. Parents want to know, when Vanderbilt as a staff, whether that's Coach Baxter, Coach Brown, yourself, when you're out evaluating a student athlete, what makes a student athlete for you, with skill sets all being equal, what makes a student athlete stand out and someone that you as a staff choose to recruit?
I think a lot of, if eyesight can give you a lot of information on how a young man approaches the game, how he readies himself for the game. That's something over time that, as an older coach, you start to go back into your Rolodex and start to understand the players that you've had and the ones that are really good at what they do. That's your eyesight and that's your instinct. But I think really when it gets down to it, it's talking to the people that they're around that can give you a real evaluation of the fibers of that person and what they're about. And I think if you had your pick of a person to come inside of this environment, it would be someone that's low maintenance. It's someone that is team first. It's someone that's driven by team, and it's someone that doesn't come with any instructions. Because if you get that type of person that comes in and say, I'm all yours, but I'm here because I just want to get inside this environment and I want to help this environment grow as much as it possibly can, that's where that person is going to gain everything they possibly can out of it. I think when someone's coming in for their own recognition, they come with instructions, they come with a lot of maintenance. It puts a burden on teammates, puts a burden on the coach. And what it does is it pulls down the environment. It pulls down the experience for everyone. And that's not what you're looking for. Regardless of how talented a kid is, the talent exists really in the fibers of the kid and how well he blends himself into an environment and makes the environment better because he's there.
And the last question that the parents are asking me to ask you, probably more towards a hammer question, but strength. A lot of parents are always asking, when's the time to begin to consider getting prepared for the college level with regard to the strength necessary to be a college student athlete? Is that something that you feel can be done starting at 12 or 13? Is it something done best in high school? What are your thoughts with regard to the younger student athletes in strength?
Well, I think strength is something that, if you're 12 or 13 years old, no, I don't. I mean, I think when a young kid starts shaving, I think that's when you can really seriously start talking about moving weight. But at the same time, moving weight and learning how to lift are two different things. I think learning technique first so you don't injure your body is the most important skill you can get through a weightlifting program. I do think weights are important. I do think there's a part of that where, and Tyler knows being in this program, where you really develop confidence by increasing your strength and watching your body grow. But at the same time, I think that's something that over the course of time of just watching natural growth of your body and learning how to do something within reason and learning how to do it right, and then adding weight as your body allows you to do it, which is typically, in my opinion, during their junior and senior year of high school. But once they get into their sport, whether it's football, basketball, or in this case, baseball, it's just learning how to do it when they get here. Because I just think there's a right way to go about that and kind of a wrong way to go about that. And I think to keep your body healthy, it's learning how to do it right first before you start stacking weights.
Well, Tim, I want to say thank you for putting up with all the technology snafus. I greatly appreciate your time. I know you're getting ready for UCLA and getting ready for the openings of the college baseball season. I want to make sure that say hi to Maggie for me, everybody in the family, Hannah, Molly, Kyle, Price. Tyler said to say Konnichiwa. He is in the land of the rising sun and visiting all the historical landmarks that we've discussed over the years.
Exciting.
But, I will stay in touch. I want to give a nice shout out and a memorial anchor down to Danny Goose Jones and everybody that is recognizing him here. Clay and a lot of Vanderbilt fans all say hello, and I want to make sure we say anchor down to Goose one last time. But Tim, thank you so much for your time, and I greatly appreciate all of your thoughts that you shared here tonight.
Thank you, Walter. I love you, buddy. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Love you too, Captain. Say hi to Maggie for me.
Thank you.
All right, man. Thank you.